Hello, everyone. Welcome to SAW Dialogues 2022, presented by Art and Market in partnership with National Arts Council Singapore as part of the 10th edition of Singapore Art Week. My name is Nadia Wang, and I'm editor at Art and Market. It's great to have all of you here with us. On the screen now is a QR code that you can scan to access Slido for the Q&A segment. If you have any questions, feel free to type it in at any time. We will get to as many of them as possible at the end of the talk. We're using YouTube Live to stream the talk, and if you'd like, you can turn on the automatic live caption function by clicking on the CC button on your video player. I would now like to introduce Shu-In Yang, Fair Director of Art SG, who will tell us more about the talk taking place this evening. Shu-In, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Nadia. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to our latest installment of the Art SG and UBS Discussion Series, and our first for 2022. For those of you tuning in for the first time, Art SG is a new international art fair for Singapore and Southeast Asia, launching in January 2023. We will welcome over 100 of the world's leading art galleries to the Marina Bay Sands Expo and Convention Center in Singapore, alongside an exciting week-long program of collector events, talks, education, and so much more. The Art SG and UBS Discussion Series was created with our founding and lead partner, UBS, to develop a forum for critical and engaging conversations among thought leaders on topics and issues in contemporary art today. At the same time, we're delighted to co-present today's panel with the National Arts Council as part of the 10th anniversary of Singapore Art Week. For our opening panel discussion for 2022, it felt appropriate to cast a spotlight on collecting and the frameworks surrounding collecting. We have discussed artistic practice in previous conversations, but what about purposeful collecting? We are very pleased to welcome our moderator today, Aaron Cezar, the founding director of the Delfina Foundation in London, who, among many of his other illustrious achievements, from sitting on the jury of the Turner Prize last year to curating the official performance program at the last Venice Biennale in 2017, created the Collecting as Practice program at Delfina, which is the first ever integrated residency for collectors and artists. Also joining us today are highly esteemed collectors, Patrick Sun of Sun Pride Foundation and Nadia Samdani of the Samdani Art Foundation and Dhaka Art Summit. With us today, they will discuss what it means to collect with the intention of creating advocacy and education. Aaron will take us through more of their work, so I will just say we are incredibly honored to have them here. It is such a privilege to have all the speakers here today. Over to you, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shu-In. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on your time zone at the moment. I cannot tell you how excited I am to be moderating this conversation today, Collecting with a Purpose. As Shu-In mentioned, I am the director of Delfina Foundation, where residencies form the core of all of our work. Over Delfina's 33-year history, we have constantly innovated the model of residencies, recently hosting collectors in residence. Now, when we were founded many years ago, our residencies for artists helped to nurture a whole generation of the YBAs, including more than a dozen Turner Prize nominees or winners. From artists, we expanded to residencies for curators with major institutions like the Tate, and most recently with Asymmetry Art Foundation, offering opportunities for Asian curators in institutions like the Whitechapel Gallery and the Chisenhale Gallery. From curators, we broadened out to other kinds of practitioners, including collectors, which completes the circle on how we aspire to nourish the whole arts ecosystem. In 2017, we established Collecting as Practice, which explores the politics of collecting, the psychology of collecting, and the philosophy of collecting. Alongside artists, Delfina has hosted 15 collectors in residence. And just to mention a few collectors from Asia, we've hosted Lu Xun from China, Daisuke Miyatsu from Japan, Mimi Brown, who's based in Hong Kong, and Rudy Singh from Taiwan, just to name a few. These residencies explore the role of collecting and the role of collectors in society, just as our programs at Delfina explores the role of artists in society. And I should add that many of our Asian collectors and residents have subsequently helped us to establish our network of Asia Pacific patrons, who in turn fund opportunities for artists from the region. And I know a few of them are watching tonight, so thank you for your support. Now on to our panelists today, Nadia Samdani and Patrick Sun. Each have been working in the same vein as Delfina and many of these collectors I mentioned, attempting to open up the notion of what a collector is and can be, and how the acquisition, the stewardship, the exhibition of artworks has to go hand in hand with support for the whole art ecosystem through advocacy and through public education. They both channel their support through organizations. Nadia with the Samdani Art Foundation and Patrick with Sun Pride Foundation. Both foundations initially seem very far apart in their remit, but collectively, each harnesses the private passions of its founders to make a wider public impact. And this is often through collaborations and partnerships, which we'll talk about. Each aims to create a world where art is accessible, inclusive, sustainable, and most importantly, transformative to society at large. So let's start with Patrick. And before we get into the work of the foundation, Patrick, I want you to talk more generally and more personally and tell us who or what inspired your interest in art.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Aaron, for this very illustrious introduction. I look forward to a very lively discussion and to learn from you, Delfina Foundation, also from Nadia and her Samdani Foundation. Now, talking about what inspired me, I am a real estate developer from Hong Kong. And my very first project was in Hollywood Road, an area here famous for antiques, art, and curios. I would visit my site regularly and drop by my neighbors to say hello to them. And also hoping that I would be able to buy something, buy land, or merge the lot with my neighbors. But as it turned out, my neighbors were much better businessmen than I was. Instead of me convincing them to sell their land to me, they convinced me to buy art from them. So at the end, the project only engaged me for maybe a couple of years, but the passion in art entertained me for decades and bring me many years of delight.
Thank you. Now let's talk about the focus of your collection, which comes under the umbrella of Sun Pride Foundation. Please talk us through the mission and the development of the collection through a few works. So let's start with maybe an early work that you collected, and then a work that was a turning point for the collection itself, something that shifted or sharpened kind of its remit. And finally, let's talk about the most recent work that you collected and why.
Okay, to put it quite simply, what we collect can be termed gay Asian art, and we hope to collect and exhibit these work and raise the visibility and respect for the LGBTQ community. If we may have slide 1, which shows a photograph by Shangguangxi. Now, this is your quintessential gay art. We have a gay icon, and this is particularly unusual because Shangguangxi passed away in the 80s. And don't forget, in that era, the world is much more conservative. To have somebody coming out and be true to themselves is very rare and unusual. So we collected works like this, at the beginning with a gay artist, and also dealing with the subject matter about identification. And this is important not just because of the sexual orientation of the artist, but also shows that gay art is not just about homoerotica. We have issues like identity, minorities that anybody could relate to. So that's how we first started with Shangguangxi standing in front of the Golden Gate Bridge of San Francisco, which was considered a gay Mecca in the 80s. And then we moved on, expand our collection. Slide 2 shows a work by a Taiwanese artist, Ming. Chi Ming. This is a suite of 19 sets of paintings. Each set will consist of 2 works. One is a graffiti drawn by the interviewee. The artist Chi Ming interviewed gay people. Now, with a work like this, the sexual orientation of the artist himself or herself is not even important because it's obviously a gay-themed work. And as I mentioned, each set will consist of 2 paintings. One is a graffiti by the interviewee or the respondent, and the other work would be a more elaborate drawing by the artist himself. And he would term these respondents with very interesting names like the Black Widow or the Thorny Rose, so on and so forth, showing the desire, emotions, and turmoils that the interviewee suffer. So we have this stunning piece consisting of many, many works, and it was one of the very popular work that we shown in Taipei. And moving on, we have slide 3, which shows work by Waiki. Actually, on this picture, we show 2 works by Xin. On the left-hand side is a video. You will see Xin reclining in the pose of like a classical woman. Xin typically uses drag performance to refigure attitudes about gender, sexuality, desire, and objectification. And on the right-hand side of your screen, you see a face wipe. Xin would wear makeup and then would wipe it off. So it's a very interesting work, and I'm trying to show that the third category of our collection would be focusing on female artists, because as we go along doing our exhibition, we will often criticize that our collection is predominantly male, but we make a conscious effort to include more female and more transgender artists. I remember talking to Robin Beckham, the co-director of Taipei Dangdai, and he was working for Beijing at the Lead magazine. And I discussed this issue with Robin. I say, when people criticize us that we don't have enough female artists, there's not much we can do because this is the way the art world is. Just that there is more male artists than female artists. But I remember Robin told me that as an editor of a major art magazine, they have to make a conscious effort to include more female and strike a better gender balance. So I took that advice to heart. So that's why we evolved from gay artists to non-gay artists and more female or transgender artists. So that sort of encapsulates our 3 categories.
So Sunpride has this specific focus, as you're kind of unpacking for us, on narratives that relate to and surround the LGBT plus experience. Although the collection now has international works, why was it important for you as a collector to have this focus within Asia?
Oh, Aaron, Asia has a long way to go as far as gay rights is concerned. Unlike the Western society, it's still something that people balk at or shy in talking about. And I believe it's important that we do these shows. We try to anchor our show at public institutions because that's the way for us to reach beyond the echo chamber and provide a platform of correspondence or communication with the general public. We still have much work to do, and we envision our show will be a touring exhibition to all parts of Asia.
In fact, you've done 2 large-scale exhibitions so far. Maybe you can show us some images of the shows that you staged in Taipei and in Bangkok.
Yes. We have some images from the show in Taipei, and if we could have slide 4, which shows a work by a Taiwanese artist in front of MOMO Taipei. Could the support team give us slide 4, please? Yes. This is a very interesting work. It's an interactive installation installed in front of the museum. These are closet-like cubicles painted black, and the artists invite audience to write graffiti, scratch out what they want to say using something hard like a key or coin. I think the message is very simple and easy to understand. Like gay people are often abused verbally or even physically. And yet, despite this slandering or abuse, the light shines through. And a work like that in front of MOCA, all the people walking by the street are invited to participate. And it's one way to engage the public. And this is one of my favorite work from Taipei. And the next slide will show the interior of MOCA Taipei, the Museum of Contemporary Taipei. And on the left-hand side, we have some paper cutting work by a brilliant artist from China, Xi Yadie. And in the middle, the cake as well as the painting on the right is by a female artist, Wang Liangying from Taipei. And then at the far corner, you will see Shangguangxi's work, the one with him standing in front of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So I can talk a little bit about the difference between this show and our subsequent show in Bangkok. But you can see that this room is darker, and people say that the show in Taipei is perhaps more somber, more serious in general outlook. But we move along to the next slide, which shows the exhibition scene in Bangkok. You can see the venue is brighter, the ceiling is higher, and it generally lends a more festive atmosphere to the exhibition. With this picture, we see on the left-hand side a Thai artist, Jakai Siriputer, who uses weaving as his art. At the far end, there's David Medella's work called A Stitch in Time. I was very lucky because I met David in person in Manila. And I didn't know him, but when I saw him in a wheelchair at the Art Philippines, I just went there, went up, introduced myself, and basically begged him, David, please participate. He was very generous, and he agreed to give us a work, which is a very, very brilliant piece. And then in the middle, you see work by Indian artist Belbir Krishan, and at the far corner, there's Dinh Q Lei from Vietnam. And then some image on the right would be Thai artist Maitri Sirbun from Thailand. So the next slide would show Yan Vo, with his well-known work, We the People, the bronze sculpture. And then on the right would be another series, archive from Dr. Joseph Carrier. Now, I want to say that we talk to people, and then we invite criticism, and we of course would be happy to hear if they enjoy the show. Many people say that the show in Bangkok is generally happier, and people seem to be less repressed as compared to the show in Taiwan. But I believe that more or less reflects the venue, and also maybe the how younger generation in Thailand, especially the younger gay people, are out and proud. And I think that's what shapes the show. And I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I wanted you to just give us some basic kind of information too about the foundation. In terms of, is there a curatorial team? Do you have a physical space? Because right now we're talking about the exhibition format. Is that the main kind of like mission of the organization, is to pop up in different places and create this kind of conversation and provocation?
Well, the foundation is based in Hong Kong, but because we started the exhibition in Taipei, we have a team in Taipei. And it used to be so easy to fly them into Hong Kong or Bangkok. But now, of course, in the last 18 months, that was very difficult. But we still maintain a very close relationship. And the structure is fairly simple. The work is scattered all over the places because we left some in Taipei and we left some in Bangkok, and we also have a warehouse in Hong Kong. But more importantly, although the team is small, wherever we go, we try to localize the exhibition by engaging local curators, engaging local artists. And with the local curators in Taipei, it was Sean Hu and his company, Who's Art, who helped us. And in Bangkok, we have the whole team of Bangkok Art and Culture Center, led by Kun Chavichai, who's the director of the BACC. And that makes our life a lot easier, Aaron, because these are experts and they have a whole team with great support. So from everything like transportation, import, tax, and all that, we are in very good hands.
Oh, that's great. Now, I want to do a little jump around now. We're going to come back to talking more about your work locally and not only with curators, but also with local commissions. But first, I want to introduce Nadia Samdani, who co-founded the Samdani Art Foundation with her husband, Rajiv, in 2011, with the focus on developing and promoting art and culture, particularly from South Asia. Now, before we get into the work of the foundation, Nadia, I'd like to ask you a similar question to Patrick, something a bit more personal about kind of who or what inspired your interest in art.
Hi, thank you. Patrick, that was wonderful. And thank you, Aaron. So for me, I came from a collector family, mainly a business family, but a collector family. My father used to collect. And I've had an interest in art for the longest time. And so I started collecting initially very few pieces of Bangladeshi modernist art because that's what I was familiar with. That's what we collected at home. And I think when people start collecting, they like to collect things that they're familiar with. So it's easier. So that's how I started. And then when Rajiv and I, we got together, we started collecting together. We started visiting lots of art fairs, lots of biennales, museums around the world. And slowly we learned more and more. And I think to say what, one of my first works was a Bangladeshi modernist. And then we started collecting like historical works, for example, like Rembrandt etchings and things like that. But I think in our collection, one of the turning points was when we started getting into more contemporary art. So I think I'd like to share slide 13. Yeah, so when we started 13. 1-3. Yeah, so this is a work by Huma Muji, who's a Pakistani artist, and this is one of the earlier works that we collected for the foundation. And when we collected this, that it was kind of like a question and pushing boundaries, like what are the kind of works that you can live with? I have children in the house. So when we first collected this work, and I was very happy with it, my husband was very happy with it. And when this work came home, I tried to joke with the children and I said that, this is a bear. And then they looked at it and they're like, this is not a bear. This cannot look like a bear. The artist isn't good. If the artist tried to make a bear, it doesn't look. So this work is called Lost and Found, and it's supposed to be a decomposed body. When bodies go missing, and in the morgue there's a lost and found section, and I don't know exactly what is the connection I felt, but it felt real. It felt something that these things do happen, but we just don't talk about it, or it's harder to accept. So I actually, through our collection, we like more experimental works. So if we go on to the next slide. So this is a work by Shirin Sherpa, who's a Nepali, who's an artist who we showed in the one of the earlier editions of Dhaka Art Summit. This is when we went through the Dhaka Art Summit, is when we were trying to create a platform for South Asia, and we tried to, because whenever we talked about South Asia before, Dhaka Art Summit is Dhaka Art Summit now. This is like in the early, in say 2010. People were not so familiar with South Asian art. People thought, okay, Indian and Pakistani art is South Asian, but there are 8 countries in South Asia. So we were also discovering, it was also new for us because we were not too familiar. So we started researching on Nepali artists, Sri Lankan artists, artists from Afghanistan and Myanmar. So, so through our Shireen Sherpa is a Tibetan diaspora and came from the Thanga painting community background. And this work is imagined how these protector deities could travel when displaced in the world like he is. If we go to the next slide, 15. Which I will talk about later on. We're also creating a permanent space to house some of the collection, which is a sculpture park. So these are, again, through collecting, through travel, we see a lot of things, and we love the work so much. So we don't really think that, okay, what are we going to do with it? Where is this work going to go? It's more like, we love it and we'd like to have it. So this is a particular work by a French artist, Dominique Gonzalez Forrester, and it's a holographic installation, which is, it needs a huge space. This holograph projection needs about an 80 feet throw space. And the way you walk in through to see the work, you have to walk in through a sound tunnel. So it requires a lot of space. And when we first collected this work, we did not think, okay, where are we going to put it? Because at home, obviously, we don't have the space. And some time after that, that is when the idea of our permanent space came. Because like this work, this Dominique Gonzalez Forrester's work, we have also collected a few more very large size institutional pieces where we loved it so much, but we didn't think of like where to put them. But this work has been on loan for a very long time. It's traveled to a lot of places. A lot of people around the world have seen it, and hoping that finally it's going to come home soon in the coming years when our space opens. If we can move on to the next slide 16. This is also a very one of our favorite and important collection of part of our collection of artworks. This is by Novara Ahmed, who's a Bangladeshi artist, and this is from before Bangladesh was born, when Bangladesh was a part of East Pakistan. And that's when most of the artworks now belong, Bangladeshi modernists, a lot of the artworks belong in Pakistan. And through our foundation, what we're trying to do is bring back some of the historical works back. It's very hard to source, and people don't really want to let go of beautiful works like this. So this is a sculpture, and I can see this is one of the very few sculptures, and she was a female, one of the female modernist sculptors in Bangladesh, and her works are very rare. We only have a very few works that belong to the museum. As far as I know, there's no sculptures of Novara Ahmed in any other personal collections. So this is a very special work. We were in negotiation with the previous owner of the work for 3 years in talks back and forth, but finally it's home, and it holds a very special place for us.
Nadia, I think what you're kind of demonstrating here too is the kind of immense importance of collecting also as a form of conservation and also wide dissemination of artworks. Now, the Samdani kind of Art Foundation has the collection under its umbrella. It has the Dhaka Art Summit, which you referred to, under its umbrella, which is a 2-year, sort of a biannual, not biennial, but biannual kind of like event that happens every kind of 2 years in Dhaka. And also Sri Hatta, which you just referred to, which is going to be the art center and sculpture park, a permanent kind of space for the collection, but also for other educational kind of activities. I know that your next slide starts to talk about the artist Rana Begum, who is a Bangladeshi artist based in London. And I think almost her work kind of draws a line through some of those things between the collection and the Dhaka Art Summit. And I guess what I want to ask you is, could you use kind of those slides and to move on into the other activities around the Dhaka Art Summit, because it has become one of the largest or the largest platform for South Asian art. It's so rooted locally, yet connected internationally. It is, I think, an incredible kind of model for the kind of large-scale activities that can be that can work on so many different levels. And we can see this in the audiences. We started with what, 40,000 like the first year, and was 500,000 kind of in 2020, the last iteration of the summit, and the last big event I attended before the pandemic. So yeah, if you could talk about Rana, then lead into the Dhaka Art Summit, and then we'll pick up Srihata later on.
Sure. So a part of the foundation is, of course, we collect for the foundation, we support artists, we support their journeys, which is one of the things we very much enjoy, being a part of the artist's journey, watching them grow. And then we produce a lot of works, and we work with a lot of international institutions. So the next slide, I'd like to talk about Rana Begum, who is a Bangladeshi diaspora artist who lives in the UK. I'm sure a lot of you know her work. So we support artists long term. So we went from collecting Rana Begum's work as a Bangladeshi diaspora artist, and we went from producing new projects with her, and we'll also realize a work with her in our sculpture part, which Aaron just mentioned, which we'll talk about later. So the next slide. So this is in 2014, one of our earlier Dhaka Art Summit, we worked with Rana Begum, and this is the first time actually she did a huge commission with us. And this was a beautiful installation which she created with baskets. And it's from her memories when she used to live in Bangladesh, and in the village she would see these baskets being women would weave them, these baskets, and she's created a beautiful installations. I mean, the images don't do justice, but the way you would see light coming in through them. So this commission was in Dhaka Art Summit, and then again later on, this particular work was again shown at Kettle's Yard in Cambridge, which we supported with the baskets, with the production. And then the next slide is an image of one of her first solo institution project, which we supported, was at Parasol Unit. And it was when, for example, like we in Dhaka Art Summit, there's a huge numbers of visitors. Like Aaron said, in the first edition, we had like around 40,000 visitors. And in the last edition, which was in 2020, which was our 55th edition, we almost had 500,000 visitors. And visitors from all over the world, institutions, curators, gallerists, journalists, collectors, artists. It's a huge meeting point. And now
I want to point out, Nadia, that the 500,000 people are coming over the course of 10 days. This is not like the Venice Biennial, who has about this, maybe the same audiences, but comes over like 5 months.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. It's a busy time. Dhaka Art Summit is really a platform. It's, of course, there's a lot of art, there's lots of installations, performances, films, talks, writing workshops, a lot of things under one roof. So there's always an interest for everybody. And we have like children's workshops and lots of tours. It's kind of like a festival, and it was like an event When we started, it was an event that Samdani Art Foundation, it was our event, but it's no longer Samdani Art Foundation's event. It's the country's event. The country owns it now. And it's become one of those events that people actually look forward to, and it's in your diary. And this is all because thanks to all our supporters and artists from around the world who have supported us, encouraged us, and pushed us to go on with what we do. So like I was saying, Rana Begum, so this was one of her institutes. So the founder of Parasol Unit was one of the visitors of Dhaka Art Summit in 2014. And then she saw Rana Begum's work and then was invited to show at Parasol Unit in UK. So, like I said, a lot of connections happen in Dhaka Art Summit. Dhaka Art Summit is like a meeting point. It's where a lot of ideas are born, a lot of exchanges happen, for the artists, a lot of life-changing things happen. Sometimes their careers are set, they're invited to participate in incredible shows. And can we go to the next slide? And this project was, again, Rana Begum's last project in Dhaka Art Summit in 2020. It was an installation in the staircase. It was a huge installation, and some part of this installation went into an exhibition. So these are fingerprints, and this is again of her memories in Bangladesh. It's fingerprints like in Bangladesh, when there is a land transfer or a property is being transferred from one family member or from one generation to the other generation, you have to go into these government offices and you have to give your thumbprint and to accept your property. And when Rana Begum last came to Bangladesh, she had to go for an official work to see, and she went into this government offices and she saw that in the walls, people would wipe their fingers. And that's how this idea of this work came, that, okay, it's property, you're changing from one point, but it's also like a beautiful installation, but it's of your thumbprint.
Now, Nadia, I want you to move on to the next slide, which is one of your most recent works collected, which I actually saw myself at, I think it was at the last Art Basel, and I was so kind of really enthralled with this piece. But it also shows how the collection has developed and has taken risks and has also taken on, or has put kind of it puts into context South Asian art in a much wider context alongside international artists.
Right. So if we go on to the next slide, so one of our recent works was we just collected over the summer, and like I said, we actually like works that are kind of push boundaries and kind of make you think and feel and move you in certain ways. So this is an installation actually by Matt Copson, and it's called Coming of Age. And we collect emerging artists who push limits of mediums and technologies. And this is an artist who is LA-based British artist, Matt Copson, and it's an expanded cinema opera exploring essential questions of life. So basically, it's kind of like a laser work. It's where you see a baby growing, and it's got a sound piece with it. It's a fun installation, and I was with my younger daughter when we saw this work, and she absolutely loved it. So it's kind of like a family. We collected it as a family.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Now, at this point, I want to remind everyone out there of the Q&A function, which is available via Slido. The QR code was presented to you earlier. We're going to get to questions in probably 10 or 15 minutes. And what I want to say now is that, as I mentioned earlier, what ties both Nadia and Patrick together is their passions and their vision for a world where art is accessible, sustainable, and inclusive. Diversity is at the heart of all of this. In the case of the Samdani Art Foundation, ensuring that Bangladesh and South Asia are seen equally on international art stage. In the case of Sun Pride, ensuring that stories of the LGBT plus community are part of a greater societal narrative. Now, it's not always difficult to be comprehensive, as Patrick, you've talked about before, and even Nadia has talked about in terms of kind of like South Asia as a region. And each of you have taken certain actions to try and address kind of those balances of representation. But I wanted to move on in terms of ways that you both engage with local communities. And I wanted to go back to Patrick, and for the tech team, back to slide 8. And in particular, I want to talk about how LGBT plus issues do vary across the region, as Patrick kind of mentioned, and how does one kind of account for these differences? And one way has been through Sun Pride's commissioning of local artists and thinking about its remit within a very specific context in which it's operating. So, and both of you, as both Samdani Art Foundation and Sun Pride uses commissions as a way of really amplifying the collection, but also rooting it in different contexts. So let's talk about commissioning. So over to Patrick to give us a little bit more information about this work and what it meant in that specific context in Bangkok.
Right. This is a work by Aaron Runjan from Thailand. Aaron is a dear friend. So when we moved the show to Bangkok, we say, Aaron, could you do something new for us? As we realized that with our exhibition, the commission work are often the one that attracts most attention, whether it's media, or aficionados, or the general public. So I feel especially privileged that Aaron would share a personal story that he knew a transgender person when he was a kid. And the video is titled Welcome to My World T. And it's actually a very intimate and moving story about his relationship with T. Now, I always stress the point of learning, Aaron. There's so much to learn in the art world. And with this work, you will walk into a huge room, and with 5 giant screens showing different angles of this person lying in front of you. You will see left, back, right, front, And I asked Aaron a question. I say, Aaron, I understand you're talking about transgender. You're talking about what makes up a perfect woman. But do we really need such large screen? Because we're talking about production cost. But Aaron is a very dear friend. He said, Patrick, we're not just talking about transgender or gender issue. We're talking about confrontation. And that's when I learned that I'm not really as open-minded as I thought I was. I will walk into this room. When I look at this transgender person with his private parts, I would actually be quite shy. I would look away. And you have this work very popular, and young people, old people go in, they all have different reaction to it. So this is what I mean, like localize is important, learning is important, and exploring new frontiers.
And in case of Nadia, I think maybe I'll ask you about Srihata, the Samdani Art Center and Sculpture Park, because it is a physical, permanent space that's going to be located within a local community, not a community that is in a major kind of capital like Dhaka. Could you talk about the development of Srihata and how it brings together different aims of the foundation, from its educational work to its collection to its exhibitions? And for the tech team, could we jump to slide 29 to aid Nadia's contribution here? Thank you.
Yes, so Srihata Samdani Sculptural Park and Art Center is in the northeastern part of Bangladesh. This is a place, Sylhet, where Rajiv and I are from. And so the idea of the sculpture park wasn't a plan that we had for like years. It's actually a new development or a new idea. And it came kind of came as like I said earlier, when we started collecting like major institutional size works, and they need a home. Where would they go? They can't be like just traveling to different institutions all the time. I mean, we need to see it. Our people in Bangladesh need to see it. So that's how the idea of the sculpture park came. And so it's in right now. It's in the middle of construction. We hope to. I mean, the pandemic um, delayed the process, but we are working on it. So this is an image of the entrance of the park. The park is about 105 acres, and there will be residency space, a sculpture park, and a few pavilions housing the Samdani art collections.
Maybe we can see a few of those slides too, Nadia. Maybe go to the next slide, and because there's more images to captivate our audiences here.
Yeah. So it will be, again, whatever we do, like the Talk Art Summit, and it's free. It's free for all. It's a free event. It's for everybody. We don't have VIP hours. We don't have registrations. We don't have any of that. We don't have separate timings for VIP people. It's open. If it opens at 10 o'clock, it opens at 10 o'clock for everybody. Even so, the park, we're also thinking that it's going to be open to the public and for everybody. It's to visit and see and spend time. We also wanted to make it a cultural hub, so not just for art. So, we want to add in music and theater and film and curators and wellness, all kinds of food, artists who work with food. If we go on to the next slide. So these are the next few images are basically, this is an image of the residency space. The next image, this is an image of one of the galleries, which is almost ready. So this is where, earlier you saw a work of Dominic Gonzalez Forrester that will go in there. So it's also for the local community around that area to see, even the children, the kids around the village, to grow up with art, and kind of to show people in that area that art does not mean just paintings or just works on paper, that it can be of any form, that performance is an art, videos. If we go on to the next image, this is again a beautiful video installation by Shazia Sikandar. It's called Singing Suns. So again, it's a work of images with sound and music. It's mesmerizing. Then can we go to the next images? This is by Olafur Eliasson. Again, it's called Your Uncertain Shadow. It's part of the collection. So again, interactive work. When people go in, it creates multiple times, lots of shadows. Next image, please. '35. So this is again an aerial view. So in the middle is the residency space, and the white, like the river-like thing you see around, it's a sculpture by Monika Sunowska, who's a Polish artist, and it's called Concrete River. And this is a project that she wanted to realize for a long time, but in Poland, but due to a lot of restrictions and permission, it was never realized. And then when she came to Bangladesh and she saw that Bangladesh is also a land of rivers, and this is a place. This is a concrete river. So she cut out the path like a river, which you would see from an aerial view, and it was poured concrete. So it's like a walking path.
Nadia, what you're really pointing out is really great because it kind of draws another line that I wanted to kind of raise about the impact of both of your foundations on artists themselves, like through this commissioning process. And here's a great example of a project that was not able to be realized somewhere else, but made sense to be realized here, on the grounds of Sri Hatta. And I mean, that kind of opportunity really just unlocks a whole world of possibilities really for artists. In the case of Patrick, I mean, you just showed the work of kind of Aaron in Bangkok and the amazing reception that it had there. I wanted to kind of go back to Patrick and to kind of ask you about, that there's a certain kind of power and influence that you as a collector, both of you as collectors, have in terms of the market. And I don't mean this in a malicious way. I mean about how you inspire artists, but you inspire collectors to push their limits, to think about the possibilities for themselves, to think about stretching to collect younger artists, the more challenging artworks, so to think more clearly about their intention for collecting, the purpose kind of for collecting. This is very evident in the work of Sun Pride and taking risks and providing opportunities for artists. I wanted you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on the impact of kind of Sun Pride as a collection and as a foundation, and also some of the up and coming artists who you're very excited about. So for the tech team, we're now jumping back to slide 9. Sorry about this. Over to you, Patrick.
Okay. Very quickly, I like to think in a small way that Sun Pride have helped the market become more accepting to LGBTQ artists and artwork. And I also feel personally responsible to promote these artists. I have been invited to join the acquisition committee of the Tate, Guggenheim, and M+. And a funny thing is that, one needs to declare any conflict of interest, So whenever we have a voting committee meeting, I would jump up and say, hey, I'm here to promote gay artists. And they say, calm down, Patrick. That's what we want you here for. So there's no conflict of interest. Anyway, going back to young artists, I want to talk about 3 artists that I'm very excited. The first one is Singaporean. This is Khairuham Rahim. And here we have a painting about a children's book that was banned from the Singapore Public Library. It shows a couple of male penguins trying to form a family by raising a baby chick. It happened to be a true story, based on some gay penguins in Melbourne. But the book was banned, and then we have Kai doing this work, a beautiful work on this gay subject matter. And then moving on to the next slide, we have another artist, Kang Sung Lee. Now, I have to stress that, the artists I promote are not necessarily gay, but the subject matter apparently is. Here we have Kang Sung Lee, with an reiteration of an early collaboration between Keith Haring, Bill T. Jones, and Shangguangxi. Now, Lee typically would explore the legacy of queer history, especially how the minorities are often smudged from the heteronormative society. And Kang Sung Lee is Korean and now lives in the United States. And moving on to the next one, we have another artist which I'm very, very fond of, and Just Fan. And we have 2 screens, and Jazz would use 3D to print these female organs and attach them onto this screen like children's model kits. And this is part of a broader discussion to investigate how we view gender identity. So we have 3 very good artists, and I hope if you see their work at the fair or wherever, go learn more about them.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for that, and also for drawing a connection to institutions, which is a great bridge to speak about how both of your foundations engage with much wider structures. And Patrick, you already previously mentioned how the exhibition, that Sun Pride has initiated have both been within public institutions, and the importance of bringing these narratives from the LGBT plus community to the mainstream rather than marginal spaces. Nadia, you and I have known each other for many years. We both collaborated on the Samdani Artist Award since 2014. And recently, Nadia and Rajiv have helped me to set up our Global Council of Patrons here at Delfina Foundation. But you guys are involved with many institutions, both locally and internationally. And I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that interaction with institutions. And maybe we can take Tate as one example, where I think the work that you've realized within the context of Samdani Art Foundation around advocacy and public education has seeped into the institution through acquisitions around South Asian artists. And for the tech team, we're going to the very last slide. Over to you, Nadia.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, so we, through Talk Art Summit, again, through supporting, because we felt that South Asia, or more specifically Bangladesh, before Samdani Art Foundation and Talk Art Summit, when we didn't have that, when we would go places or when we would travel to art fairs or museums or biennales on all these art events, we hardly saw a presence of Bangladesh. And that was kind of a thing that would really bother us, that, we have so many great artists in our country. How come they're not all over the world? So that was kind of like an initial idea of how our foundation's journey started and the Talk Art Summit. And through one by one, and then we started supporting institutions, museums, for example, Tate. Tate we have been part of Tate. It's going to be 10 years this year, 10-year anniversary of Tate's South Asian Acquisition Committee. And we have, through this committee, we have bought several works of Bangladeshi and South Asian artists to be a part of the museum. We've also gifted from our foundation, we've also gifted a few works, like you can see in this image. This is a Rashid Chaudhry work, but this is an image of the Met Museum. And Rashid Chaudhry is one of our very important modernist artists. And these are tapestry works. And the one was a gift to the museum at Met. And this is an image of a display, and two were on loan from our collection. But also with Tate, I think it is so important for us to support these institutions and also exchange ideas and knowledge of our country. And I think Dhaka Art Summit is a very big and an important research platform for researchers and curators to come and discover. And through our team and different institutions, we work as a bridge, that we want to make connections and we want to help artists to get where they should go and be a part of the journey. And I think for us as collectors or as a foundation, the biggest joy for us is to see an artist succeed and do well and be really all over the world. And right now, after doing 5 editions of Dhaka Art Summit, now whenever we go to art fairs or big biennales and shows, there is a presence of Bangladesh. And so we no longer feel left out.
Nadia, I'm going to now, and Patrick, I'm going to start threading in some of the questions from Slido, the Q&As from our audience out there. And I'm going to give the first one to Nadia because it kind of connects to what you're talking about. And the question is about the collecting community in Bangladesh. So has it changed since you started the Samdani Art Foundation? How have you seen the collecting community change? We talk about artists, what about collectors?
Right, so yes, there's a lot of people collecting, But then again, not as seriously as we'd like. But there are collectings. But then again, like I said at the very initial part of my talk, that when I started collecting of only artists and artworks I was familiar with, because that's what people like to collect. People, because I feel it's hard for people to kind of collect like something they don't know about, or kind of feel like, okay, this is what I love. It's a crazy installation or a really out of the box kind of thing that, I'll just go home with it. That I don't see so much, but I feel like people like to collect safe things. But I wish there's more. But it's happening. There's baby steps, but it's happening.
And for Patrick, when you were setting up Sun Pride, did you face any pushback in any way, shape, or form, and how did you overcome it?
Well, there was one instance when I went to gallery and tell the lady that we collect gay art, and she just basically turned 100-degree around and walk away. But I have to say, most other people are not like that. I'm like 99.9% of the galleries or curators are so friendly and so supportive. And that's how we were able to expand. They would introduce us, point us to the right direction. And that's how one door is open after another. And that's how we build up our collection.
And this is actually a very good kind of segue into a question I did have about both foundations have curators who support kind of the thinking, the research that goes into the collection, but also your exhibitions as well. In addition to your team, I mean, so in case of Patrick, it's Emmanuel and Michael, and in case of Nadia, it's Diana Campbell, who's the artistic director of the Samdani Art Foundation, and Laxmini Chowdhury, who's the assistant curator, plus many other people I'm not naming, and I'm sorry, not naming everyone, but these are some of the key kind of like name and figures. In addition to these people, who else influences kind of your thinking? Who else influences, what catches your eye and maybe what to buy? I'll give it to Patrick first.
Well, I think it's very important that we see the work in person, not just to experience it visually, but actually connect with people. I can't wait for the day we can all go back to the art fair and Biennale, because we need to talk to the gallerists or the artists, about what they do. It's not easy for us just to walk into an art fair and say, this is gay, this is not. We need to talk to the gallerists and find out more about the background information and get to know the artists personally, so that we know when we exhibit, we're not intruding on their privacy. So that is very important. And I certainly hope that, this pandemic will be over soon.
And now that you already talked about the Samdani Art Summit being a research platform for curators, is it also one for you as a collector?
Yes. Of course. I think people who influence, I think most of our friends are artists. And I think they are the ones who influence us the most. I think studio visits for us is something we love. So studio visits and spending lots of time and talking and understanding the work, relating to it. And of course, there's biennales and art fairs. Of course, that goes without saying. But I think in terms of influencing, it's definitely the artists and spending time with them.
Mm-hmm. Now, given your kind of achievements as collectors and your status in the art world and the incredible networks of knowledge and contacts that you both have access to, I wanted to ask you both, what is the single most important issue that you think is facing this generation of artists and facing this generation of collectors? Maybe I'll ask Patrick to respond first if you're ready.
For the first question, I would say for the artists, I think the important issue would be social responsibility. It sort of also echoes what Sun Pride does. Whether your passion is in gay rights or environment or any other issue, I think it's important to have some social responsibility. As for collectors, I think it's very hard to single out one issue. For example, because of my own inadequacy, I think proficiency in technology is important. I'm sure that does not bother Nadia at all because she leads a company that specializes in information technology. But to me, there is so much happening every day: NFT, virtual walkthrough, online exhibition. So that to me is something that I would like to be better at.
Okay, and Nadia, so what do you think is the most important issue facing artists and collectors like now?
I think important, well, for artists, I think mostly it's social issues, environmental, sustainability, and yeah, just what's happening around. I think these are the main issues. But for collectors, I don't know. I mean, it's just so much. And like Patrick just said, like these new digital things, like talking about NFT, I feel like it's another world. I had like, I think 20 people explaining what an NFT is to me, and I'm still like, what? I still don't understand. So I think we're still struggling with these new things, but yeah.
And so one last question, I think, before we hand back over, which is kind of coming from the audience at large, is kind of what's next for Samdani Art Foundation and for Sun Pride. So Nadia, why don't you start? What's next for the Samdani Art Foundation?
So next, right now, we are scheduled to have the 6th edition of Talk Art Summit in 2023, February. So stay tuned. And also, our Samdani Sculpture Park, Srihatta Samdani Art Sculpture Park, is also scheduled to open soon. I'm not giving any dates, but we're working on it. And yeah, that's the future. So we want to have like lots of residency even for curators and thinkers, for everybody, and even for collectors, Patrick. So in the future. But yeah, and I just really hope the world opens up and we can easily travel and see each other and see art in physically and really interact together.
So Patrick, what's next for Sun Pride?
Hong Kong. I'm very happy and excited to say that the next exhibition will be held in my hometown. We have locked down the venue, and it will be another large-scale exhibition with a gay theme. The press release would be coming out very soon, so I would save that until a later date. But yes, I hope that when the show is held, then all of you can come.
Wow, we all look forward to this day when we can travel and return back to Hong Kong, and of course, go back to Dhaka for the next Samdani Art Summit. I'm sorry, the Dhaka Art Summit. So as we've all kind of heard today, collecting kind of really means very different things to different people. And what we've been talking about today is kind of collecting with a purpose. And speculative investor type of collecting often receives a lot of press coverage, which in my opinion, ultimately distorts the public perception of art and art's real value, its social value, which we're talking about here, beyond its financial value. Collecting practices and approaches that are more generative and generous, like the Samdanis, like Sun Prides, often receive kind of fewer headlines. But I'm very happy that we have been able to use this panel to showcase further the incredible work that's done by kind of Nadia and Patrick, who are kind of leading a whole kind of generation of collectors who are trying to redefine kind of what it is and why collecting is being done today. I'm going to hand over now to Xian, but I'd like to thank Nadia and Patrick for joining me today for this conversation.
Thank you, Aaron, Patrick, and Nadia. It was such a privilege to sit through that discussion. It was, receiving this amount of insight from two amazing collectors. It really reminds me that collecting is the oxygen of our art ecosystem. And without passionate collectors such as yourselves, we would not have, an art scene at all. Some of the topics covered today are very close to our heart because they actually really articulate the vision of Art SG. We're based in Singapore, but we have strong networks across the whole Southeast Asia region, and we hope to connect Southeast Asia with the rest of the world. So I would like to invite everyone to visit us in Singapore next year, 12th to 15th January 2023, where we hope to have more similar conversations and see everyone in person. Over to you, Nadia, to close off the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Shuin, and thank you to Aaron, Patrick, and Nadia for the conversation. I learned so much from all of you. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. If you would like to find out about all the talks in SAW Dialogues 2022, please scan the QR code on the screen now. All recordings of the past panels are available for viewing on SAW Digital. Do also look out for the summaries of each panel that will be released on artandmarket.net, where we share key takeaways from each talk. Before you go, we would like to invite you to complete a survey to help us improve the program for the next Singapore Art Week. I'll give you a moment to scan yet another QR code on screen. When you have completed a survey, you can take a screenshot of the submission page and show it at Gilman Barracks in Singapore at the info booths at blocks 9 and 47 to collect special SAW 2022 merchandise. SAW Dialogues 2022 is presented by Art and Market in partnership with National Arts Council Singapore. See you at the next talk. Have a good night.